with Jess Lujan.
Good evening, Guam. I'm Jess Lujan. Welcome to this edition of The Buzz. Tonight, exciting guests, actually, a newly formed task force, the Governor's Educational Learning Task Force, and I got committee chair and co-chair, Vince Guerrero, the Governor's, of course, Chief Educational Liaison, now wearing another hat as well, on top of the other one, so your head's getting piling on a little bigger here.
No, it's rubbing off.
It's rubbing off, okay. As well as your co-chair, the Interim Superintendent of the Department of Education, the co-chair for the newly formulated Governor's Educational Learning Task Force. The task force, of course, was first announced at the Governor's State of the Island address a couple weeks back. Since then, you've had, I think, you just had another meeting a couple nights ago, I think it was. You've had two meetings. Tell us, again, we know the array of problems of the Department of Education. What was the premise on getting this task force, and what will make this task force, again, be different from, say, board members and other task force that have been in place over the years? Because we're task forced out.
And that's true. There have been a number of task forces in the past. This task force actually has broad stakeholder participation. So we have members from both sides of the aisle of the legislature. We have members of both sides of the aisle in the Board of Ed. We have Tulling and some key folks from the Department of Education. We have the full support of the governor and all of the resources brought to bear by the administration. And we just think that with a lot of that common interest, that we should be able to move some of these agenda items forward with more optimism for success than there have been in the past. But I'm sure that previous task force chairpersons had the same view.
Yeah. Now, Tony, let me ask you this, because not only you come from the public sector, you come from the private sector as well. What I've noticed in going and reviewing the task force committee, I guess, chairs at this point, they're composed, of course, of the governor's selection. But what I see, and you know, I could be wrong on this, in the task force, there's basically all government employees and or board members, legislature. But what we lacked, I think, we lacked here, because many a times when Department of Education, you know this, a lot of times the private sector, the military, they come to the assistance of the Department of Education numerous times. Why were they not? Is this something that will be added on? Would they be added on as members to these subcommittees? Or again, just my point of view, I'm seeing that lack of involvement from a broader section of the community.
I know that we're trying to reach out to as many stakeholders as possible and encourage them to participate. In fact, we were just at a meeting with Senator Samabini, at which we were speaking with key members of the Chamber of Commerce as well as key business leaders, and certainly invite them to engage in discussions with us. You know, it's our Department of Education, and we certainly you know, would welcome hearing and getting the support from the private sector as well.
So yes, you're correct. That what the governor wanted to do was, through the leadership, through the membership of the task force, identify government folks, because those are those
under his purview.
Right. And then from that point on, we're asking the committee chairs to bring in, as necessary, those folks that they need. For instance, one of the committees is technology and security. And I sent an email out to the chairperson, Ed Cruz, who's the governor's chief information technology advisor, and who is in charge of IT in the Department of Administration and the government of Guam. We're asking him to bring in security firms, bring in IT folks, bringing anybody from the private sector in particular who can propose solutions for us to look at. How can we make the facilities that will be upgraded, that will have, you know, pretty expensive equipment installed and put inside, how can we make sure that they're safe and secure and not subject to continuous vandalism and theft?
Now, let me ask you this, because Tulling, you know this on a daily basis. You're 24/7 manager at this point. The situation on Talon Middle School was shut down. We have other schools out there that are crying out for help. Students, right here in KUAM, students have been interviewed by Southern High, by Simone Sanchez, Ocean View Middle School. Now the task force basically puts here the Untalan return to campus as the top, whether or not that's the most important at this point. But there are things, I mean, Southern High, Simone Sanchez, Ocean View, and other schools are just as important. They're saying, hey, how about our transition? Where do we transition to? How do we handle this simultaneously, knowing we only have one teaching?
So we do have about $60 million in that was identified.
The ERA funds, right?
The ERA money that is now local, and so we're right in the process of either issuing the IFBs or negotiating with the vendors. We actually have a couple in under protest. And so, you know, one of the things that we'll be working with the task force on is looking at creative financing to kind of bridge the gap between the amount of money that we have versus, you know, the needs to address you know, all of the schools. And so Sodexo did a study that identified about $139 million worth of work that needed to be done at our schools. You know, we have about 60, so there's, you know, quite a bit of money that we need to hopefully identify funding for, and we've got a committee that's looking just at that, and so you know, that's something that we're hoping to address.
Now, I know that again, the task force leader, the team leader, I think it's Principal Jim Regis, right?
For the Untalan?
Yes. Yeah.
Only.
Now, yeah, for Untalan only. That's that's his baby.
Yes.
Okay. Now he was asked basically a wish list. He says, hey, of course, our wish list is to move out of there. We have a parking problem. We have, you know, there's no room to grow. There's no wiggle room. We know the population. We know the population is going to be concentrated up here, and we know there's going to be spillover. Those are Untalan's a feeder school. We know that that's going to rise. Knowing that, we know we don't have the money, knowing that at some point, again, we're going to have to, that school is going to be too small to a community. Do we look at it short term and say we're going to fix it, again, to accommodate what we have right now? Or do we look longer term and say maybe we need to go somewhere else because we know we're going to outgrow that school in a 2 or 3 year period? But hold on, because we got to take a break, and you can answer that when we come back, okay? Be right back.